You see, there are men who are going to tell you there's nothing there, simply because it's impossible to explain it. Why can you see the coins in the first place? There's no answer. Stranger yet, how can you read the markings? No answer. Why do they appear in some types of photography? In other types, there's nothing there. If there really were something there, you should be able to see it no matter what kind of film you're using. But that isn't the case. Yet there is something there. I couldn't possibly make it up. I've never seen a Judean lepton in my life before. I wouldn't know what to conjure up. You can't call it self-hypnosis. Yet we can read 7 out of 10 letters in sequence in the middle of the 2 words Tiberius Caesar. That's what it is, a Judean lepton, minted by a character named Pontius Pilate. The Bible refers to it as the widow's mite, the smallest coin ever minted in Israel. We found 3 of them in a museum down in East Point, Georgia. They look as if they've been cut out of a piece of bronze with a pair of tin snips. But the important thing is that depending on which numismatist, which coin expert you happen to be talking to, this particular lepton was in circulation for a maximum of either 3 years or 7 years. Take your choice. One man says 3, the other 7. But that only means that if whoever put those coins in his eyes was using a coin that was currently circulable, a coin that he could spend in the stoa, the man in the shroud, whoever he might have been, appears to have died within a 7-year maximum of the 12th year of Tiberius Caesar. That's our AD 29. He died between the year 29 and 36, possibly between the year 29 and 32. How much closer would you like to try to get it? Let me tell you about the man. Once again, there is no name on the cloth. But you've all seen Quincy on television. If you haven't, your kids have. The forensic pathologist, the medical detective, the man who will take a corpse and tell you all there is to know about him. This work was done at Los Angeles Forensic by Dr. Bob Buckland. They have the rather dubious distinction of being the world's busiest. They get more corpses per hour than any other lab in the world. They know dead men. Philadelphia Forensic, Dr. John Gambisia. What I'm about to say is documented. The man in the shroud was a Jewish person. He was between 30 and 35 years old. He stood 5 feet 8 inches tall. He weighed approximately 155 pounds. He took one of the worst beatings the doctors have ever known a man to take and walk away from it. This is the dorsal image. It's his back. You have his head, shoulders, buttocks, legs. His feet are at the bottom. All the white on the image itself is blood. The frontal image likewise. All of the white is blood. It is not a photograph of blood. It is blood. Proven in the laboratory 12 different ways. 2 of them are acceptable in any court of law in any nation in the world today to prove the presence of blood in an object. The man in the shroud took in excess of 120 strokes of a 3-thonged Roman flagrum. A flagrum? A short leather whip. Lashes about this long. 3 of them. 2 balls of lead on the end of each lash. They were either sharpened or they had spikes in them. Meat was ripped out of his body with every flick of the lash. He was scourged nude, bent over double and tied to either a ring in the floor or a short post, so that his back was like a tabletop. They could do what they wanted to do to him. He was scourged by 2 men standing on opposite sides. The man on the right was a little bit bigger than the man on the left, and a lot more sadistic. He enjoyed his work. He overlapped his strokes. He curved them around to get the front of the body. There isn't an inch of his body, front to back, and we can see every inch with X-ray fluorescence, that does not bear scourge marks. They picked the most sensitive areas to cut him to shreds. The only place they missed is the pericardium, the area immediately above the heart. The doctors say if he had taken that kind of a beating over the heart, he would have died under the lash, which means that this one had to have been done by experts. They were pros. It was not the first time that they had ever brought a man to a second or 2 before death and then stopped. They knew how to make it hurt the most and last the longest. When one more stroke of the lash would undoubtedly have killed him, the beating stopped. The man in the shroud wore a cap of thorns. Not a circlet, the way we've always envisaged Jesus wearing, but what appears to have been a complete cap. His entire head is covered with puncture wounds, made by a small, extremely sharp and pointed object, such as the thorn. To me, it makes a great deal more sense. I find it very difficult to imagine anybody that would give a man a beating like that, taking time out like a preschooler to make a daisy chain. For me, at least, it's a great deal easier to imagine someone getting a sadistic idea. He says he's a king. He needs a crowd. Grabbing his sword, running out the back of the Fortress Antonia, cutting off a thorn bush. Eastern thorns, of course, are that long. Possibly grabbing a handful from the fire, quickly twisting him into a knot or a ball, maybe tying a rope around it, jamming it down to his eyebrows. Something like that was done to him. The man in the shroud carried a heavy object tied on his shoulders after the beating, something that weighed between 70 and 100 pounds. He has no flesh left on his shoulder blades. The wounds have been rubbed together, the flesh is chafed off. Undoubtedly, this would be the cross piece of the cross. Contrary to paintings and sculpture, such as the Way of the Cross, there really is no record that the Romans ever made anyone drag the entire thing. At least normally, if there is such a word, they would tie the cross piece on in the position of crucifixion. Then they would march the victim through the streets to the site of the execution, always taking the longest possible route, wandering up one street and down the next one. The entire idea was to deter future crime, to keep you from doing whatever it was this poor devil did. They wanted the greatest number of people possible to see him dying. The records say that they would have a leash around his ankle, a strip of leather like a dog, to keep him from running away. They also say it was considered fun to pull their legs out from under them with their arms tied in this position. The man in the shroud has the end of his nose gone, with dirt ground into it from a bad fall. He has no skin left on his left knee, with dirt in it. He took at least 2 major falls. Someone worked him over rather badly. He was belted in the face more than once. He's got a shiner that's a real beauty. He appears to have a broken nose, but he has no broken bones. The nose is cartilage. There appears to be a separation in the cartilage. It's almost as if someone might possibly have taken a club and hit him sideways across the face. Someone grabbed his beard, ripped it out. His beard was plucked. They had a great deal of fun with him. This is not a photograph. It was done with a computer. Neither is it color accurate. It isn't intended to be. The idea was to determine how much blood was visible in his face. Using the big computer, they've subtracted everything in the face except the blood. There is nothing visible in this picture except blood. They certainly didn't leave very much of him, did they? To me, if nobody else, that's Isaiah 53. He was mutilated beyond that of any other man. At the very least, this is undoubtedly what you would have seen if you'd seen him hanging on the cross. The man in the shroud was crucified. Once again, not the way we've always imagined Jesus being crucified, through the palm, but through the wrist. Probably the simplest thing I've ever known of anyone to do in shroud-related work. Someone obtained a cadaver, the body of a man. They took his arm off at the shoulder and nailed it to the wall with a 10-penny nail through the palm, then sat and watched it for a couple of hours. In something less than 2 hours, the bones in the palm separated, the nail ripped through, the arm fell. Simple conclusion, a nail through the palm will not support the dead weight of a man's arm, let alone a body in the throes of death agony. But we have a small space in our wrist, just below the heel of the hand. Ironically, the size of a square-cut nail. A couple of these little toys driven through there will hold any amount of weight. If you've never seen one before, it's a crucifixion nail. Cute, aren't they? A pair of them driven through the wrist will hold anything. It does not conflict with Scripture. I realize that depending on which translation of the Bible you might own, the Gospel of John uses the word hand, a palm, for the point through which a nail was driven through Christ's body. But the Greeks have got at least 3 words for everything. It was a native-born Greek pastor that said this. I took this to Pastor Zekas. If this were the 1st century, he'd be a bishop. He's in his mid-80s. He's still servicing 9 churches on foot and with a donkey. He's got scars on his body to prove what he believes. He's been stoned for his faith more than once. He laughed at me. He said, Paul, you Yankees are all alike. You're just never going to get it through your thick, stupid Yankee heads that we Greeks have got 3 words for everything. And he's right. If any of you are Greek, I've got to ask you forgiveness in advance. I know what my pronunciation is. I've had Greeks scream in agony when they heard me try, but it's the best I can do.